My name is Nancy. I'm 62 years old, and this happened not long ago right here in Florida, USA. I spent more than 30 years building everything from nothing. I started by selling homemade pastries and caramel candies outside the elementary school where my daughter Rachel was studying. She was about 7 at the time, and I had just become a widow. My husband, a construction worker, died in a job site accident. Overnight, I went from being a housewife to a single mother with no income, responsible for both of us. I would wake up at 5 a.m., bake, wrap everything carefully, and take it to the school gate to sell. At first, I only sold to kids after school. Gradually, mothers began ordering for birthday parties. With time, I managed to open a small bakery. I worked 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. Rachel grew up in that bakery doing homework on the counter, playing among sacks of flour, and sleeping on the old sofa in the back when I worked late. Maybe that's why I always tried to make up for her modest childhood. Every spare dollar went to her nice clothes, toys, English and computer classes, summer programs, everything I never had. By the time Rachel turned 18, I owned 3 bakeries. I paid for her private college tuition in business management, bought her a car, even financed a small apartment so she could live independently. I always believed that's what a mother should do, give her child everything she never had. Over the years, I grew my bakeries into a small food supply company, serving restaurants and schools in the area. The business became so successful that I could retire at 55 with steady income. But I still lived simply in my small old house in the suburbs of Tampa, surrounded by familiar furniture and frugal habits. All the extra money I saved for Rachel's future. Rachel married at 27, divorced at 34, and changed jobs constantly. Every time she struggled, I was there. When she divorced, I paid for the lawyer. When she lost her job, I covered her bills for months. When she wanted to start an online clothing store, I invested the seed money. But as time went on, I realized our relationship wasn't what it used to be. Rachel only called when she needed something. Some months she didn't call at all. I saw her more on social media than in real life. After 2 years living alone, the loneliness became unbearable. The house was silent, dinners were empty, and weekends dragged by in front of the TV. One evening, I gathered all my courage and called my daughter. "Rachel, sweetheart, do you think I could stay with you for a while? This house feels so empty." She paused, sighed, and said, "Fine, Mom, but you'll have to stay in the living room and please, don't touch my stuff, okay?" Not the answer I hoped for, but I told myself it was better than being alone. I moved in with her, hoping we'd grow close again. I was wrong. The first few days were fine. I woke up early, cooked breakfast, cleaned up, Rachel went to work, and I took care of the house. But soon, I realized my presence irritated her. She came home with a frown, answered curtly when I spoke, skipped dinner, complained the TV was too loud, even rolled her eyes when I chatted on the phone. One night, she brought some friends over. I heard her in the living room say, "This is my mom. She's just staying here for a bit." Her voice was flat, as if I were a burden she hadn't figured out how to deal with. I stepped out to help with food, but Rachel waved me away. "It's okay, Mom. We ordered pizza." Then she gestured for me to leave like I was the help. Worse still, one day, I overheard her on the phone. "I don't know what to do with her anymore. She doesn't have a life of her own and just hangs around all day." It was as if 40 years of sacrifice had never existed, as if I were just an old piece of furniture, cluttering up her life. And then that Thursday afternoon in March arrived. I was cooking and reading the real estate listings in the paper when Rachel came home. She looked annoyed, scrolling through her phone as she sat down. "Sweetheart, I made creamy chicken, your favorite when you were little," I said, forcing a smile. She mumbled without looking up. I set the table and gently added, "Maybe this summer we could take a trip together?" It's been so long. We could go to the beach, or maybe Savannah or Charleston. You used to love those places." She slammed her fork on the table, eyes cold as ice. "Don't you get it? I have my own life. You're just another mouth to feed in this house." The world stopped. I froze. My daughter, the child I'd loved, raised, and protected all my life, had just told me I was a burden. She kept eating like nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just torn her mother's heart in two. I sat there in silence, swallowing my tears. After lunch, Rachel left for work. I stayed alone in the kitchen, staring at the pile of dirty dishes, and that sentence kept echoing in my head. "Mom, you're just another mouth to feed in this house." That night, while Rachel went out with her friends, I sat on the old wooden chair on the porch, watching the streetlights reflect on the quiet Miami street. I thought about my whole life, the years of hard work, the unspoken sacrifices, the dreams I gave up just so my daughter could have everything. And now, at 62, I had become another mouth to feed. Right then, I made a decision. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer, Robert, who had handled my finances for more than 20 years. "Hello, Robert. I'm sorry for calling this late, but I need to ask you something. The apartment building where my daughter lives, do you know if it's for sale?" He sounded surprised, but said he would check and call me back. The next day, he called with unexpected news. The building's owner was in financial trouble and needed to sell quickly. "How much is the building, Robert?" When I heard the price, I didn't hesitate for even a second. "Offer 15% above asking. I want the deal closed as soon as possible. And please, absolute confidentiality. No one can know I'm the buyer." Rachel had no idea. And I already had a plan. To understand that moment in the kitchen, when my daughter said I was just another mouth to feed, we need to go back to where it all began. I was 29 when my husband, John, passed away. Rachel was about to turn 8. Overnight, I became a widow. No job, no assets, just a little girl, and a small amount of savings that wouldn't last long. I still remember the despair of those first days' sleepless nights, my heart pounding, lying awake calculating how many more weeks our savings could keep us afloat before everything ran out. Poor Rachel didn't understand what was happening. She asked me, "Why are you crying, Mom? Why isn't Daddy coming home? Why has everything changed?" It was my neighbor, Mary, who gave me the first idea. "Nancy, your cookies are amazing. Why don't you try selling them outside the school?" It sounded impossible. I had never worked a day in my life. I'd always depended on my husband's paycheck. Now, I had no choice but to stand on my own. I started scared, but determined. Every morning, I woke up at 5 a.m., baked cookies, fudge, and peanut brittle, wrapped them in clear plastic bags tied with pink ribbons. Rachel loved helping me make. She adored those mornings stirring the batter, licking the spoon, laughing. That first week, I sold only 6 bags of candy. I came home heavy-hearted, convinced I'd never make it. But Rachel ran to the door and asked, "Did you sell them all, Mom?" I smiled and lied. "Yes, sweetheart. I sold everything." Little by little, more kids began to notice my treats. Then the mothers started ordering for birthdays and church events. After 6 months, I had steady customers. A year later, I was earning more than I ever dreamed of. But what I remember most from that time wasn't the money. It was the determination never to let Rachel go without. If other kids had new toys, so would she. If they took piano or English lessons, so would she. I worked twice, sometimes 3 times as hard, just so my daughter would never feel the loss of her father. Maybe that was my mistake. I spoiled her too much, overcompensated for everything she'd lost. When she demanded something, I gave in. When she refused to help with chores, I did it myself. I thought, she's already lost her father, at least let her have a happy childhood. Rachel, 12 at the time, would stop by after school, doing her homework at the counter, helping me wrap cookies, chatting with customers. Everyone knew her as Nancy's daughter from the bakery. When she started high school, Rachel grew distant. I thought it was just normal teenage behavior. She preferred hanging out with friends instead of helping at the bakery. I wasn't upset. I was happy she had a normal teenage life. When it came time for college, she chose business administration. "If I study this, Mom, I can help you run the business," she said. I was deeply touched and proud beyond words. I paid for her private college tuition, bought her a new laptop, and even gifted her a used Toyota Corolla so she could get around. But during college, Rachel changed. She began to feel embarrassed about my work. When friends asked, she would simply say, "My mom owns a few small bakeries," but never mentioned the years we spent struggling and building everything from scratch, as if she wanted to erase that part of our past. Even so, I kept investing in my daughter. When she graduated, I bought her a small apartment in Orlando so she could live independently. "Every woman needs her own space," I told her. I could feel the distance between us growing, but I still believed it was just a phase. At 28, Rachel married a middle-class man named Eric. I paid half the wedding costs, bought all the household items, and even gave them extra cash to start their new life together. The marriage lasted 7 years. When they divorced, she was devastated, crying on my shoulder like a child. "Mom, I don't know how to live on my own anymore." I paid for the lawyer, the divorce fees, and even covered her rent in Orlando for 6 months. By then, I owned 3 bakeries and had just expanded into a food distribution company that supplied restaurants, diners, and schools across the area. My business was thriving and stable, and I thought we could finally live peacefully. But the more successful I became, the more distant Rachel grew. She only reached out when she needed something. Lost her job? Call Mom. Car broke down? Call Mom. Wanted a vacation? Call Mom. But to simply talk, to share, to ask, "How are you, Mom?" Never. At 55, I decided to retire. I sold my bakeries and the distribution company, investing in stable funds that provided monthly income. Finally, I could rest, travel, and enjoy life. But enjoy it with whom? Rachel was always busy. Whenever I suggested going somewhere together, she made excuses. "The grandchildren I had long hoped for never came," she always said. "It's not the right time, Mom." Most of my old friends were former colleagues, and once I retired, those gatherings faded away. For 2 years, I lived alone in my quiet suburban house in Tampa. Each day I woke up with nothing to do but watch TV, read a few books, and tend to the flowers on my porch. But the loneliness grew heavier, especially on weekends when I heard laughter and chatter from neighboring families while I sat alone. One day, I gathered my courage and called Rachel. "Sweetheart, do you think I could stay with you for a while? This house feels so empty." It wasn't easy to say. Independence had always been my greatest pride, but loneliness was slowly killing me. Her response left me speechless. "Fine, Mom. You can stay in the living room, but please, don't touch my stuff." "No." "It'll be nice having you here." "No. I'll be happy to have your company." Just cold indifference, as if I were an uninvited guest. Still, I packed my things and moved into her apartment in Miami, carrying the hope that maybe we could reconnect, maybe find our old bond again. But I was wrong. From the very first days, I could feel her discomfort. She came home from work, and the moment she saw me, her expression darkened. I tried to make conversation. She answered. I offered to help. She waved me off. "No need, Mom. I can handle it." I tried to be useful, waking up early, cooking breakfast, cleaning, shopping, preparing dinner, but I was never thanked. In fact, she seemed even more irritated whenever I touched anything in the house. One afternoon, while I was folding laundry in my room, I overheard Rachel talking on the phone in the living room. I don't know what to do with her. She just stays home all day doing nothing. It's exhausting having another person to take care of. Another person to take care of? That sentence felt like a knife to my heart. I, the woman who had raised her, sacrificed everything, who still had my own income and shared living expenses, was now seen as a financial burden. From that day on, I moved quietly, breathed softly, afraid even a sound would bother her. In my own daughter's home, I tried not to exist too much just to avoid being a nuisance. It was bitterly ironic. I, the once strong woman who built a life from nothing, now felt like a stranger in the very life of the child I had loved the most. And then came that fateful Thursday lunch, when Rachel said, "Mom, you're just another mouth to feed in this house." All the pain, all the humiliation bottled up over months exploded inside me. 40 years of sacrifice, hard work, unconditional love, all reduced to a monthly expense. That night, while she went out with friends, I sat silently in the dark, thinking about everything. How did I raise a daughter who could see her own mother as a burden? How could my kindness be seen as an obligation? How could my love be treated as something so obvious that it no longer deserved respect? And I understood it was time for a change. I had spent my entire life caring for Rachel, always putting her needs above my own. Maybe now, it was time to start taking care of myself. It was then that I called my lawyer, Robert, and found out that the apartment building where Rachel lived was up for sale, an opportunity that felt almost destined. After that call, I spent the next 2 weeks living under the mask of pretense. I still stayed with Rachel, smiling, cleaning, cooking, pretending as if nothing had happened. But inside, a storm of pain and determination was brewing. Those 2 weeks were the longest of my life. Every morning, I had to act normal while my heart still bled from my daughter's cruel words. Rachel kept behaving as if nothing had changed, as if my 40 years of sacrifice were nothing more than a monthly bill. The first weekend after that, she brought a man home, probably a coworker. While I was preparing food in the kitchen, she said, right in front of him, "Mom, don't worry, we're just having a light snack." Then she waved her hand, dismissing me like a housemaid. The man, being polite, turned to me and asked, "Ma'am, wouldn't you like to join us for lunch?" But Rachel quickly cut in. "My mom prefers to stay in her room, right, Mom?" I stayed silent, went back to my room, closed the door, and listened to their laughter, echoing from the living room laughter that stung like salt on a wound of loneliness. On Monday morning, Robert called. "Mrs. Nancy, I've completed the paperwork earlier than expected. If you're still comfortable with the offer, we can sign the contract this week. And remember complete confidentiality." The purchase went through faster than I could have imagined. The previous owner, Mr. Miller, was in serious financial trouble. When Robert offered 15% above market value, he accepted immediately. "Mrs. Nancy," Robert said, "Mr. Miller wants to close the deal this week. He needs the money urgently." "Good, the sooner the better," I replied. He hesitated for a moment. "May I ask what this is for, ma'am?" "Let's just say it's a strategic investment." Robert had known me for over 20 years. He had seen me build my business from nothing, so he knew I never acted on impulse. "You're sure you want to keep your identity hidden as the buyer?" "Absolutely. All the paperwork will be under the real estate investment company I've used before." Officially, my investment company was the one buying the building. My name wouldn't appear on any documents Rachel could ever stumble upon. That week, I started observing Rachel differently. Every glance, every sigh, every cold look, I noticed them all. Every act of disrespect, every dismissive word, I carved them deep into my heart. Then, on Wednesday, Rachel came home clearly irritated, She must have had a bad day at work. From snippets of her phone calls, I could guess what was going on. That evening, while I was watching the evening news, Rachel walked into the living room. "Mom, can you turn the TV down? I've got a headache." I immediately lowered the volume. 10 minutes later, she said again. Loud. I turned it down even more, until I could barely hear anything. "You know what, Mom? Maybe you could watch in your room? I need some quiet." I grabbed the remote, turned the TV off, and stood up. "All right, honey. I'm sorry for bothering you." She didn't respond, just kept scrolling through her phone like always. That afternoon, Rachel came home for lunch, something that rarely happened. She looked exhausted and upset, slamming her phone onto the table, muttering about her problems at work. I prepared lunch carefully, creamy chicken, her childhood favorite. Deep down, I still hoped for a spark of warmth, maybe a small thank you. I set the table and said, "It's so nice to have lunch with you again. It's been a while, hasn't it?" She answered flatly, "Yeah, a while." I tried to start a conversation. "I think we should take a trip together this summer. It's been such a long time since we've gone anywhere. Just the two of us." That was the moment the glass overflowed. She slammed her fork on the table, glared at me, and shouted, "Don't you get it, Mom? I have my own life. You're just another mouth to feed in this house." This time, I didn't cry. I looked straight into her eyes and calmly said, "I understand, honey." She turned back to her meal as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just cut the final thread of our bond. I finished my lunch in silence, but in my mind, the final decision had already been made. Thursday was the day to sign the last documents. Early that morning, my lawyer Robert called. "Everything's ready, Mrs. Nancy. You can come in to sign any time." "I'll be there right away," I said, and told Rachel I had to go to the bank, which wasn't entirely untrue. At Robert's office in downtown Miami, I signed all the papers. When I held the building's keys in my hand, I felt a quiet surge of power. For the first time in months, I was no longer the one begging. "I need you to update the lease contracts for all the apartments," I told him. "Start with Unit 134. The others are still under contract, but that one's been expired for over a month." "And how much do you want to set the rent at?" he asked. I had already researched rental prices in the area. Similar units were renting for twice what Rachel was paying. The previous owner had kept the rent low for years. "The current market rate is $3,200, I said. Robert nearly choked on his coffee. "Mrs. Nancy, that's double what she's paying now. That's a fair price. If she can't afford it, she can find somewhere else." My daughter said I was just another mouth to feed. Now I'm deciding to feed that mouth myself legally, through rent. That afternoon, I came home with the papers in my purse, feeling as if I had just completed an important mission. Rachel came home for lunch again, irritable as usual because of something at work. And once again, she repeated the same line, as if twisting an old knife. "Mom, you're just another mouth to feed in this house." But this time, I was ready. I had an answer. We finished eating in silence. When Rachel left for work, I sat down and began planning for what I called the moment of revelation. That afternoon, I called a moving company in Miami and scheduled them for Sunday. I also called Rosa, my former housekeeper of over 15 years, asking her to clean up my old house in the suburbs of Tampa. "Mrs. Nancy, I'm so glad you're coming back. The house must have missed you," she said warmly over the phone. Then Friday, the day of truth, arrived. I cooked a beautiful dinner, filled with Rachel's favorite dishes, not out of affection, but as a polite farewell. Spirits. Her work troubles seemed to have cleared up. She even said, "Mom, thanks for dinner. It's delicious." I replied, "You're welcome, honey." "Oh, are you going out with your friends this weekend?" "Yeah, they're staying over. So please try not to have the TV too loud, okay?" Even when she was being friendly, She still treated me like an unwanted guest in her own home. Of course, Rachel. Oh, I have something for you. I took out the envelope I had prepared and placed it on the table. My hands didn't tremble. What's this? Open it and see. I watched her eyes move across the pages, then stop. Her expression shifted from confusion to shock to panic. Mom, is this some kind of joke? No, sweetheart. It's very real. I bought this building last week with my own money. She stared at me, as if trying to recognize the woman sitting across from her. But why? Because you made me realize that between us, there's nothing left but a business relationship. You said I was just another mouth to feed, so I decided that if that's the case, at least I should be paid for it. But Mom, you doubled the rent. I can't afford that. Then you'll have to choose pay the full price or find a place that fits your budget. Mom, I'm your daughter. Yes, that's what I used to think until you made me understand that. To you, I'm just another expense. Rachel tried to convince me otherwise, crying and saying I was being cruel, that no mother should treat her daughter like that. But inside, I felt a calm I hadn't known in years. It's not cruelty, Rachel. It's consequence. You wanted independence? Now you'll truly have it, complete independence. All weekend, Rachel kept trying to make me change my mind. She promised to be more caring, more patient, saying she was just going through a tough time. But I knew this wasn't a phase. It was who she really was. And a person's nature doesn't change in a few days. On Sunday morning, the moving company arrived right at 8 a.m. Rachel stood there watching me pack my things, her face blank, as if she couldn't believe what was happening. Mom, you can't do this to me. Oh, I can and I am. You have 30 days to decide. Either pay the new rent or move out. And if I can't do either, then you'll learn what it really means to live independently. I carried my luggage out of that apartment, the place where I'd lived through some of the hardest months of my life, without looking back. On the drive home, I felt both sad and relieved. Sad that my relationship with my daughter had come to this. Relieved that I had finally regained my self-respect. When I got home, Rosa had already cleaned everything, and lunch was simmering on the stove. It's so good to have you back, Mrs. Nancy, she said with a gentle smile. And it was true, being back in my own home. Being myself again without asking anyone's permission, that feeling was wonderful. Those first few days alone in my old house felt strange. After months of tiptoeing around, afraid to make a sound, I could finally live freely in my own space again. I woke up when I wanted, brewed my own coffee in my kitchen, turned up the TV as loud as I liked. Those little things, I had forgotten how precious they were. But I had to admit, there was still an emptiness in my heart. No matter how much Rachel had hurt me, she was still my daughter, and I knew what I'd done would change our relationship forever. On Monday morning, Robert called. Mrs. Nancy, your daughter came to see me today. What did she want? She tried to convince me to reverse the paperwork. She said you were confused, not in your right mind. I laughed softly. And what did you tell her? I told her the Carrie documents were perfectly valid and that you were fully lucid when you signed everything. That first week, Rachel called me every day. At first, to argue, then to beg, and finally, to threaten. Mom, you can't do this to me. I'm your only daughter. That's exactly why this hurts so much, Rachel. If a stranger had treated me this way, I would have walked away long ago. But you're my daughter and you still disrespected me. I was just stressed. I didn't mean what I said. No, you said exactly what you meant. And now, you're facing the consequences of your own words. Rachel started reaching out to relatives, calling my sister Helen and even some distant cousins, hoping they'd pressure me to change my mind. Helen called me, sounding worried. Nancy, she told me you've lost your mind, that you bought an entire building just to get back at her. I gave a dry laugh. Helen, you've known me for 62 years. Have I ever done anything impulsive? Never. Then don't worry. She's just panicking. She's finally learning the lesson she should have learned long ago, what it means to take responsibility. She tried borrowing money to cover the new rent, but no one would lend to her. She tried asking for a raise and was turned down. During that time, her behavior was unpredictable. One moment she was pleading softly, the next she was angry and accusatory. Mom, are you really ruining my life over one small argument? No, Rachel. That wasn't an argument, that was you showing me what you truly think of me. In the end, when the first month was over, Rachel had no choice but to move out. She found a smaller apartment, farther from downtown, but one that fit her budget. For the first time in her life, Rachel was living within her means without any financial help from me. In the early days at her new place, she called me, crying. Mom, the shower's broken. Mom, the fridge is making weird noises. Mom, the neighbors play loud music all night. And I calmly replied, What do you want me to do, Rachel? You said you were independent. Now it's time to prove it. Those were difficult conversations, but necessary ones. At 41, Rachel was finally learning how to handle the small problems of daily life, things I used to fix for her without hesitation. Meanwhile, the building turned out to be an excellent investment. The income from the other apartments was steady, and Rachel's old unit was quickly rented to a young couple who paid full market price and never complained. 3 months later, Rachel began to change the way she spoke to me. The desperate phone calls turned into more thoughtful conversations. Mom, I know you think you were too harsh on me. No, Rachel, I know I was simply being fair. Maybe you're right. Maybe I needed to learn what independence really means. It was the first time she admitted I might be right. That Mother's Day, Rachel came to visit me, bringing a small gift, a potted plant she had grown herself. I'm sorry, it's not anything expensive, Mom. I'm learning how to save now. It was the most meaningful gift I had received from her in years, not because it was cheap, but because it showed she had finally learned the lesson I'd spent a lifetime trying to teach. It's beautiful, sweetheart, I said. Thank you. We sat together, talking all afternoon. She told me about her life in the small apartment, the early struggles, learning to cook, and how she had begun to appreciate every dollar she earned on her own. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course, honey. Do you forgive me? I looked at her and realized she was no longer the selfish, stubborn woman who once pushed her mother out of her home. There was something different in her eyes, a quiet maturity. I forgive you, Rachel. But more importantly, have you learned something? I have. I've learned that independence isn't just doing whatever you want, it's taking responsibility for your choices. 6 months later, Rachel got a promotion. With her new salary, she could have moved somewhere nicer, but she chose to stay in her modest apartment. I'm happy with this simple life, Mom. I'm even saving money now. By the end of that first year, Rachel surprised me with a suggestion. Mom, how about we have dinner together once a week? Are you sure? I wouldn't want to bother you. She lowered her head, a little embarrassed. I deserve that. But no, Mom. Having dinner with you would make me happy. Weekly dinners, where two women talked as equals, not as the sacrificing mother and the dependent daughter. Rachel began asking about my life, my feelings, my dreams, things she had never cared about before. Mom, have you ever thought about traveling? With the income from your apartments, you could see the whole country. I've thought about it, but it's lonely to go alone. How about I go with you on your next vacation? And so, after more than 10 years, we took our first trip together. We visited Charleston, South Carolina, strolling through the quiet historic streets, dining by the sea, and talking more than we ever had before. During that trip, Rachel said, Mom, I know you did all this to teach me a lesson, and it worked. I never appreciated everything you did for me. I thought it was just your duty. Now I understand it was love, and love is never a duty. 2 years after that fateful lunch, the relationship between Rachel and me had completely changed. She called me often, not because she needed help anymore, but because she genuinely wanted me around. She invited me to meet her friends, proudly introducing me. This is my mom, Nancy, an incredible businesswoman who built everything from scratch. At last, my daughter had learned to be proud of our journey instead of hiding it. Last Christmas, she gave me a gift that brought tears to my eyes, a photo album capturing our life together, from her childhood to now. On the first page, she had written by hand, "To the strongest woman I know, thank you for teaching me that real love sometimes requires strength. I love you, Mom." The building I bought remained a wonderful investment. Thanks to that steady income, I fulfilled many of my unfinished dreams. I traveled across Europe, renovated my little house in Tampa, and even bought a new car. But the most important thing wasn't the money, it was that I had regained my dignity and self-respect. I learned that unconditional love doesn't mean accepting every wound. Sometimes I wondered if I had been too harsh. But when I looked at Rachel, now independent, mature, and respectful, I knew I had done the right thing. Rachel had learned that a relationship can only last when both sides respect each other, that respect can't be forced, and that independence always comes with responsibility. And I learned that it's never too late to teach someone about self-respect. A mother who truly loves her child must sometimes be firm, because self-respect is the first step toward being respected by others. Our story didn't end like a fairy tale. It ended more truthfully, with two women learning to respect one another. Now, when I sit down to dinner with my daughter, I am no longer the mother who only gives and never receives. I am a woman of worth, someone who built her own life and deserves to be treated with kindness. And Rachel is no longer the daughter who only takes, but a grown woman, grateful, loving, and aware. We're still mother and daughter, but more than that, we're two women who respect each other. And I've realized that this is worth more than any love mixed with condescension. The lesson I learned, and what I hope Rachel understands, is simple. Love is not about letting others step on your self-worth. Love is valuing yourself enough to demand the respect you deserve. Sometimes, to teach someone respect, you must be willing to temporarily lose what you love, because, in the end, what returns is a love that's deeper, wiser, and more genuine. And when I think back to that afternoon, when Rachel said I was just another mouth to feed, I no longer feel pain, only gratitude. Because in that very moment, I decided to stop begging for affection and start demanding respect. This story is a work of fiction inspired by real experiences, with names and details changed to protect privacy. Though our circumstances may differ, perhaps we've all faced that moment to stay silent and endure, or to speak up for our dignity. Nancy chose the latter not out of anger, but out of self-respect and love for her daughter's growth. Maybe in life, silence can keep the peace, but only by speaking up can the heart truly be free. I believe that no matter how painful the journey, God always blesses those who live with integrity and sincere love. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. Keep following our channel, and don't forget to watch the 2 videos suggested at the end screen, stories that will touch your heart.